Now, even though I've always enjoyed and been a huge fan of the prequels, I can certainly admit they're not perfect films, that they have their issues, especially Episode 2, I'd say. In my opinion, on the surface at least, Attack of the Clones is easily the roughest of the three. It also arguably has the weakest dialogue, mainly between Anakin and Padme as they're supposed to be falling in love. And yes, you can argue that in the film, Anakin is a 19-year-old young man flirting with a woman for the very first time in his life, that of course he's going to sound awkward and say things way over the top that someone with more experience in that department probably wouldn't say. Even still, it's a bit much or too awkward, and it is borderline creepy at times, I think you could say. And in the end, they have to tell each other and us, the audience, how much they love each other, instead of us just really feeling how much they love each other. Then there's the story itself and the way everything plays out, or how it all transpires and leads to the start of the Clone Wars, which might make one ask if everything happens because this is an extremely intricate plan that goes off without a hitch, because Palpatine is that damn good, or if it just doesn't make a lot of sense upon closer examination, and things just happen because they happen. And yes, I know I'm not the first person to ask these questions or to make a video just like this one, not even close. And if you're someone who loves Attack of the Clones, you think it's the best Star Wars movie and it's a perfect film, well, that's great. Just keep in mind this video is all in good fun, and that questioning or criticism should not always be interpreted as an attack. Instead, it's oftentimes meant to be constructive and to begin conversation. Besides, you don't even know what my final conclusion will be just yet. Anyway, let's just jump right in and start at the beginning of the movie. And with one of those things that maybe doesn't make a whole lot of sense, especially at face value, though also might be something you've never really thought about, which is, why does Padme think that Dooku is trying to have her killed? And don't get me wrong here, I get that Star Wars movies have a way of jumping into the middle of a story or the middle of the action, and then you just go along with the flow unhindered by too much exposition. I know that not everything gets explained in a Star Wars movie, and I am okay with that. But in this case, Dooku wanting to kill Padme isn't something that I question because we didn't get all the details. It's something I question because the few details we do have don't add up. It doesn't make sense that she would possibly come to this conclusion. Think about it, Padme is opposed to the Military Creation Act, right? She might not be for the Separatists leaving the Republic, but she certainly doesn't want a war with them if there's even a chance to avoid it. And you'd also think this was something the Separatists would basically be all for too, leaving the Republic peacefully, I mean. Or at least that'd be the common held belief, you'd think, or you'd have to imagine. And it seems to be that's the belief the Jedi hold, especially after we hear them describe Dooku as a political idealist, as said by Ki-Adi-Mundi, and that Mace Windu says of him that he was once a Jedi and couldn't kill anybody. In other words, or the impression given, is that the Separatists just want to, well, they just want to separate from the Republic, and that it's the Republic trying to keep them in, to keep the whole thing intact, and that they are even considering creating a military to do so, which means Padme being opposed to that, to making an army and potentially a war, would be something the Separatists who just want to leave the Republic, that they'd be happy with, that they'd sort of be on the same side here. They wouldn't want to kill someone who doesn't want to force them to stay in the Republic. And sure, we know, or we'll learn later on, what's going on behind the scenes here, that Dooku and Palpatine actually want a war, and that Nute Gunray of the Trade Federation wants Padme killed, and that's part of the deal, and once she's dead, they'll offer up their battle droids to fight alongside the rest of the Separatists. We, privy to that critical information, know why Dooku is actually trying to kill Padme. We know, or will learn, she was right all along, even though I don't think Dooku was actually trying to succeed in killing her, but we'll get into that in a minute. But what we don't know here is why Padme would ever think that Dooku is trying to have her killed, and doesn't seem to offer a shred of evidence to back up her claim. She marches into the office and says, I think Dooku's trying to kill me, and everybody says, well, that doesn't make any sense. But she doesn't back down, and she doesn't in any way, shape, or form, again, give a shred of evidence as to why she feels this way. And what would actually make more sense here for the story is if Padme was actually for the creation of a military, that after what happened on Naboo some years ago in The Phantom Menace, she's learned that sometimes you have to be, let's say, proactive, sometimes you have to fight or be willing to fight. Which isn't to say she's a warmonger or anything close to it, only that she had her idealistic vision of the galaxy when she was 14 years old. She had that vision shattered by, well, the reality of war and what it takes to sometimes free your people. You can't just sit back and say, I don't condone a course of action that leads to war when your people are suffering. This could even be something that later on in the film she talks about with Anakin, and that the two see maybe eye to eye on, and it starts to form a bond or relationship between the two. But let's not get into that. If people like this video, I'll make a part 2 where I will, shall we say, discuss ways to fix some of the issues with Attack of the Clones, from my point of view anyway. But for now, going back to what I said a moment ago, I don't know that Dooku is really trying to kill Padme. In fact, I don't think he is. I think he just wants to make it seem that way to Newt Gunray. I mean, it's hard to know exactly just how much Dooku is in on Palpatine's plan and how much he isn't, because one way or another we know his boss, Palpatine, doesn't actually want Padme killed. He instead wants her life put in danger so that he can suggest that Anakin, who has probably talked his ear off about Padme over the years, that those two can go off together and fall in love while Obi-Wan chases down a lead to a bounty hunter, which leads to the discovery of the clone army, and well, you know the story. Basically, I think a big part of Palpatine's plan is to bring these two together so that they fall in love, and then, as seen in Revenge of the Sith, he can use Anakin's love for Padme against him, that he will use his fear of losing her to turn him to the dark side, which he of course does. And to me, again, with him suggesting that Obi-Wan and Anakin be the ones to protect Padme, I have to believe that plan is starting right here and now, the one that comes to fruition in Episode 3. I even could see it that indirectly, or through some sort of back channels perhaps, that Palpatine is the reason why Padme thinks that Dooku is trying to kill her, that somehow he has put that thought into her head, even if, as described before, it doesn't make a ton of sense when you consider they should kind of be on the same side. But here's the thing, if these, we'll call them back channels set up by Palpatine, if they've told her or her security force that Dooku is trying to kill her, and that an attempt would be made on her life if she went back to Coruscant for the vote, which happened, it's then led her to believe that, well, the Dooku part is probably true as well. And again, this is all set up by Palpatine. It is all a part of the plan. He, through those back channels, warned her about the assassination attempt because he doesn't want her dead and just wants her life in jeopardy so that he can get Anakin to go and watch after her, and then the two can fall in love so that she can be used later to turn him to the dark side. And so we can find a reason why she does think Dooku wants to kill her, but accusing him without any evidence or presenting any evidence at all still doesn't make a ton of sense. And of course this wouldn't be the only attempt on Padme's life. The next one would be carried out by Zam Wesell, and get relatively close to succeeding. Anakin sensing it at the last possible second and then rushing in to save her is what, well, saves her life this time. A chase then ensues, and when Zam is captured by the Jedi, by Anakin and Obi-Wan, Jango Fett uses, to kill Zam, a poison dart that has on it an identifying mark that comes from the place he's staying at. So the question here has to be, is Jango clumsy? Is he being set up? Is he maybe in on everything? Or does this just make no sense? I mean, just because you use a dart that has, shall we say, a brand or a logo on it, doesn't mean you have any relation to those who make the dart or can be found where it's being made. If you commit a crime wearing a pair of Nikes, it doesn't mean you're connected to Nike or live at the Nike factory or that the cops will go look for you there. It just happens to be the brand on your shoes. And sure, the film doesn't present it as if Obi-Wan thinks he's going to find the bounty hunter on Kamino once he learns that's where the dart's from. He's just investigating pretty much the only lead he has, which is that the dart has this unique logo, and he happens to then find the bounty hunter there very conveniently. He seems pretty surprised, though, when it does happen that way. He also seems pretty surprised to find a clone army being made for the Republic. However, it does seem he was meant to find it, that this was part of the grand plan of Palpatine. After all, it's hard for the Republic to ever use the clone army and the Clone War to begin, if no one ever stumbles on the clone army in the first place. Which then brings us right back to how much Jango Fett does or doesn't know and why he uses that particular dart. Did he not realize what the logo on it was? Or maybe the darts were given to him by Dooku and he was told that he should use these if anything went wrong, which Dooku expected things to go wrong. He expected the Jedi to be able to track him back to Kamino and then to find the army. Or maybe he, Jango, was in on it and knew the dart would lead them to Kamino and that was part of the plan, and again, he knew that. However, I don't think that's the case. Jango seems rather surprised when Obi-Wan shows up and he immediately wants to leave, and not to lure Kenobi to the next place in the chain of events he needs to go to or to Geonosis, but because he feels like something has gone wrong. Jango feels like this is not a part of the plan, that this wasn't supposed to happen, and he wants to get away before things get worse. And actually, I think there's a chance this is where the plan was just supposed to end, one way or the other. I don't know that Jango was supposed to lead Obi-Wan back to Geonosis. That may have just ended up being a bonus for Palpatine that really worked out. And certainly if Jango is all in on the plan, if he knows what's going on, he's not in on this part since he does try to kill Obi-Wan at Kamino and then tries to kill him again when he shows up on Geonosis or in space above Geonosis. Basically, it seems there's no way Jango knows that he's supposed to lead Kenobi to Geonosis, if he even is. For all we know, the only thing Palpatine wanted was for the clone army to be discovered at this point, and that was it. Everything that came after was, like I said, a sort of bonus. Or maybe he knew or had foreseen that Kenobi would ultimately track Jango back to Geonosis and be captured. And for the sake of argument here, let's assume that is how it was supposed to go. Let's assume the plan continued. Let's assume Palpatine figured, or again planned, or knew through premonition perhaps, that Obi-Wan would make his way to Geonosis only to be captured, but not before relaying that message back to the Jedi Council on Coruscant, or should I say to Anakin and Padme who were on Tatooine at the time, who then relayed it back to the Council. Which may have been something that Palpatine did not expect. After all, it seems as if something was wrong with Kenobi's transmitter on his ship, and that he originally was just going to contact the Council directly, meaning Anakin, who was supposed to be hiding on Naboo, would have never known about Obi-Wan being captured, and likely, I think, the plan was for Obi-Wan to just be executed and the Jedi to get there just a little late, and that's what starts the war. This would then mean that Anakin would lose his mother and mentor all at once, leaving Palpatine to be the only confidant he has left, well, that and Padme, of course. Because I really don't think those two were ever supposed to go to Geonosis, Padme and Anakin. And potentially get executed as well, which almost happened. I think they were supposed to end up on Tatooine, and that would have been that for them. They would have learned about the execution of Obi-Wan and the start of the war well after the fact. And I do think Palpatine planned out the death of Anakin's mother, both the timing and manner it happened in. Again, I think he was supposed to be far, far away from Geonosis and the war at this time. Palpatine didn't want him there and potentially executed. He wanted him gone and to feel guilty probably about not being there when Obi-Wan was executed. Also, in Revenge of the Sith, Palpatine was originally going to reveal to Anakin that Dooku had his mother killed, that he had set it up with the Tuskens, and that's what pushed Anakin over the edge to kill Dooku, but it was ultimately cut from the film. Basically, I think Palpatine's plan was for Anakin to go off and fall in love with Padme, and then to lose his mother and Obi-Wan at essentially the same time, which would push him even closer to Padme, of course, but also to Palpatine. And then, as seen in Revenge of the Sith, Palpatine would eventually turn him to the dark side by making him fear losing Padme. Oh, and for the record, I think Nute Gunray was just roped into siding with the Separatists during the war, even though Padme hadn't been killed, because he was dumb enough to be present at the execution. And I think Dooku was in on most, if not almost all, of Palpatine's plan. That's pretty evident by the way the movie ends, where he and Sidious discuss the good news that the war has begun, which also makes it seem like everything was a part of the plan, that almost nothing happened by chance. Other than, I still think, the part with Anakin being there, I don't think that was ever part of the plan to have him almost executed. I think he was just supposed to be on Tatooine grieving his mother, and then he hears he's also lost Obi-Wan. Furthermore, or to clarify, another part of the plan Palpatine had was to just have Padme gone or away from the Senate during all of this, and it was also to have Jar Jar there to suggest the emergency powers. And as I've theorized before, I think Palpatine recognized that Jar Jar was maybe something special, that his luck was some sort of manifestation of the Force, or the Force working through him, and then he took advantage of that. And so another thing I would change, or should I say add, is having Palpatine mention at some point that it was his idea for Jar Jar to come to Coruscant and be a representative, playing it off as just his desire for the Gungan people to have a voice in the galaxy, but in reality wanting Jar Jar there to play the very part he did ultimately play, taking advantage of that luck and knowing that if Jar Jar proposed the emergency powers, they would happen or the vote would pass. In closing here, though I don't know that Attack of the Clones ends up being the best Star Wars movie, the events that transpire in it do, for the most part, make sense. If you want to believe that everything just kind of happened to fall in place or work out as it should, which is something that Palpatine is very good at, everything does seem to proceed as he has foreseen, well, most of the time. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think about Attack of the Clones. Does everything make sense, or is it just a mess of a movie? And though I do enjoy it well enough as is, there are a few things I would kind of change or add for fun, and perhaps I will do a video on that if people enjoyed this one. Either way, take to the comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.